Hi everyone, I'm Charlie Goody, Content Marketing Manager at Cision and your moderator for today's webinar. Today we're pleased to bring you Current Climate Comms, Steering Your Strategy During the Pandemic, where I'm joined by 4 brilliant PR and marketing professionals to discuss how they've adapted their comms plans in light of COVID-19 and inspire us with some of the great projects they've been working on during the crisis. So thanks for joining us today. Some things to note before we get into it. We're tweeting using the hashtag Current Climate Comms, so keep an eye on the Cision UK Twitter handle. We'd love to hear from you too. Please submit your questions in the Q&A panel, and we'll leave some time at the end to answer as many as possible. And finally, an on-demand copy of the recording will be made available afterwards. So as we know, the pandemic is shaking up daily life, and much like everything else, communications has taken a hit. Over the past few months, we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly in PR, confusing messages to the public and brands failing to squeeze into the narratives, while exciting new ways of storytelling and positive initiatives have blossomed. Today, we're excited to hear the positive side of the coin, so how different brands and different goals have controlled their messaging in order to save comms during uncertain times. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our panel of speakers. So we've got Ben Knox, Head of Communications at Healthwatch England. We've got Caroline Sanger-Davis, Director of Marketing at Chester Zoo. Richard Maynard, founder of Maynard Communications. And Chris Baker is the founder of Serious Tissues and former Head of Strategy at FCB Inferno. Thanks for joining us today, guys. So we're going to kick off with Ben from Healthwatch England. After starting out as a trainee press officer nearly 20 years ago, Ben has worked both in-house and at agency for charity, government and health sector organisations. He is currently Head of Communications for Healthwatch England, which was established 7 years ago as a watchdog for users of NHS and social care services. His team supports communications by 152 Healthwatch services and covers key areas such as brand, audience insight, campaigns, content marketing and digital channels. Thanks for joining us, Ben. I'm going to hand it over to you to explain a little more about what you do and what you've been working on.
Thank you very much, and hello, everyone. This photo was taken at a Healthwatch community event at the start of March. My organisation runs thousands of these events every year to find out people's views of NHS and social care services, but this was one of the last that we held. It was only 88 days ago, but with lockdown and social distancing, taking this photo today would be impossible. And it's only 66 days since we went into lockdown on the 23rd of March. But to me, and I'm sure many of you, it feels like a lifetime ago. We've all had to change things in our personal lives. Trips, holidays, celebrations with family and friends cancelled or put on hold. And certainly on the work front, we had a new strategy and work plan, much of which has had to be reviewed, repurposed or put on ice. We've all had to adapt, and I think we'll all need to continue to do so as we face a future that's more uncertain than it did 9 weeks ago. Certainly for my organisation, we've been through a real journey, but what's really helped us along the way is taking an agile approach to things. So quickly gathering insight, whether it's from the public, our people, our staff and volunteers, our partners, or through our channels to help inform our next move. Supporting our people to rapidly exchange information and to collaborate across our services, and being open to quickly adapt to changing conditions and open to new ideas. And finally, keeping solutions simple and not overworking them. An agile approach has and will continue to help us find our way. Today, I just want to briefly take you through the journey that we've been on so far and offer a few reflections on where we might go next. Am I moving to the next slide, please? First, let me say a bit more about Healthwatch. So we were set up by the government to be the independent champion for people who use health and social care services. Made up of Healthwatch England at a national level and over 150 local Healthwatch services, we carry out our role by asking people and visiting services to find out what's working and what could be better for people when it comes to their health and care. We also provide advice and information to the public who need help accessing care. And we tell those in charge of the NHS and social care services the improvements people would like to see. And at the end of February, we were reflecting on what had been really a good year for us. We just won an award for our largest ever national campaign. And across England, our services have supported hundreds of thousands of people to share their stories of care and to get the right advice and information. And we were planning on our next year, but then COVID-19 hit. Do you mind going to the next slide, please? Now, there are lots of different models of how a crisis unfolds. And from a quick trawl of the internet, some models have up to 6 different phases. I'm not really sure that COVID neatly fits into any model, but it does provide one way of illustrating how my organisation has had to adapt the focus of our communications as the current crisis has evolved. So obviously in February, we all had the warning signs that something unprecedented was coming. So as the COVID-19 cases climbed, we took action to protect local people, our staff and our 5,000 volunteers, many of whom are elderly. This meant putting a pause or cancelling a lot of the public and staff events and engagement opportunities that we run every day. We also had to start to plan for what was to come. So we paused a lot of our campaigns that we were planning and thought instead about the resources and communication mechanisms we'd need. This involves some really simple things, such as setting up a cross-team crisis group, which meets daily to assess and action work, and setting up dedicated sections on our public and staff-facing websites and online forums to share and collect information. In retrospect, we moved to the next phase to redirect resources in a matter of days. As a public body, we knew we needed to do all we could to help combat COVID-19 and to make clear our communications and stakeholders, and to make clear to our communities and stakeholders that we're here to help. Throughout this crisis, there's been a huge demand for clarity and certainty. At this stage, this meant making clear to our managers and stakeholders that we should focus any spare capacity into helping the public with their questions and queries, alerting services to the safety issues that patients tell us about, and supporting local efforts to combat COVID-19, such as getting our volunteers to support vulnerable people who are shielding from home. It also meant supporting our staff who suddenly found themselves working remotely on an entirely new issue. I've lost track of the issues we had to address by rapidly producing guidance. But when it came to communications, our staff wanted to know things like, how can we make clear that we're open for business? What appropriate images should we use to communicate COVID? How do we frame messages in a way to get people to share their stories about safety issues? But we covered a lot more. I think that we're currently coming to the end of what you might call the management phase. And during this phase, this for us at Healthwatch England has involved a cycle of answering the questions of staff and the public, encouraging people to share their stories of COVID-19 so issues can be identified and so that more people can be encouraged to come forward, raising issues with government and the NHS that need to be addressed around the problems people are having accessing care and some of the confusion around some of the public information that was going out, developing new content to help address information gaps, and scanning the horizon for the next issue we might need to act on. The impact and the way people have pulled together has been really, really impressive. We've seen thousands of people come forward to share their stories about COVID-19. The number of people visiting our website to get answers to questions around shielding, mental health, end-of-life care and other issues has doubled. And our volunteers have done some amazing work to support vulnerable people who are shielding at home. Many of you must have found yourself in a similar position of helping to address the confusion and uncertainty that the current crisis has caused. In the early days, the tempo was frenetic, but it does feel that we're entering the next phase, which some own the media are referring to as the new normal. Would you mind moving to the next slide, please? You, like me, are probably planning as best you can about how we exit lockdown. At Healthwatch, we're planning our first big campaign of the year. We originally planned to run this in March, but the campaign has been repurposed to highlight to the public how they can help the NHS recover. Treatment and care for millions of people has been delayed, but it needs to restart. The campaign will focus on how you, by sharing your experiences, can help services quickly spot and address issues that are bound to arise. But we face challenges, which I'm sure your communications also face, that we need to address. With such a quickly changing environment, how can you make sure that campaigns, by the time they launch, are still relevant? How do you address the divide in attitudes that are appearing? I think there was very strong public support when we went into lockdown, but now we're starting to see a divergence between those who want to return to a normal service as quickly as possible, while others think that we're coming out of lockdown too quickly. We also have to think about how people will behave in this new normal. So for us at Healthwatch, will people be prepared to come to our events, where even if there's social distancing involved, or to be stopped in the streets by our volunteers? What cultural change, the way our culture has changed, will that mean that more people are actually willing to take part and contribute to community causes like Healthwatch? Will changes to the way organisations work risk leaving some behind? A report in April found that 90% of GP appointments are now taking place digitally. But what about those who don't have the resources or the interest to be online? None of us yet have all the answers, but I believe an agile approach can help us find our way in a new normal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that. So I noticed that you mentioned earlier that you face a few challenges, and you mentioned the social distancing aspect of it. So I was wondering, what impact has lockdown had on your services so far, and have you adapted your comms strategy to combat this in terms of social distancing, as I'm sure your service can't interact with the public as they normally would do?
Yeah, well, I mean, a huge amount of our engagement takes place face-to-face. So, you know, whether that's in services or whether that's at community events. And often that's because actually those are the best ways to reach certain sections of the community who maybe are sometimes overlooked by local services. Now, yeah. All that has to stop. So for us, it has been a real challenge. I mean, thankfully, more people have gone online. But, you know, working through community groups and also using our involvement in things like the volunteer response around COVID-19 has been a really useful way for us to still reach sections of the community, but it is still a challenge.
Yeah, so have you found yourself sort of going back to traditional methods, pre-online, and the tools that we have today? Have you found that you've had to go back to using those traditional methods in order to reach a certain demographic?
No, I mean, I think it's trying to do more digitally. So, for example, one of our services, for example, they've got their volunteers providing digital training to certain groups who might struggle to go online. So, for example, the elderly, so that they can access their appointments around GPs and other things like that, but also at the same time take part in some of the consultations that we want to run to find out what their experiences are like.
Okay, yeah. So there'll be quite a few people, viewers and listeners, wanting to find out how to avoid confusing messaging in these times, because, like I mentioned earlier, there has been a lot of confusing messages during COVID-19. Have you got any advice that you would give to listeners and viewers about how to avoid confusing messages in comms specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say this, particularly when the government guidance earlier on was not fully developed and was changing, you know, on a daily basis as people identified issues with it. We certainly found that the keys were really understanding what the question is that people have. So using insight to really understand the question and make sure you've got a really strong kind of user story for your content. Keeping it simple, so not trying to answer everyone's questions, because actually there are official sources, you know, which can do that. Regularly having processes in place for regularly reviewing and updating your content. So rather than trying to create new content the whole time, having content that you're just updating as you go. And also combating myths. I think that was particularly in the early days. It's amazing how misconceptions could arise really, really quickly. And actually, a lot of our services, you know, particularly online, and you know, played a really strong role in trying to clarify things for their communities.
Yeah, great. Thank you. That's really useful and helpful information. So, thank you, Ben. Thanks for that. Okay, we are going to move on now. Head over to Caroline now to talk about Chester Zoo's initiatives. So, just a bit about Caroline. She has had an extensive career in marketing, communications and fundraising with several directorship roles in the cultural sector. Following 5 years as a freelance consultant, she joined Chester Zoo in 2012 as head of marketing, later becoming director of marketing. She leads on marketing, PR, fundraising and public affairs for Chester Zoo, which is the UK's most visited zoo and a leading conservation charity operating around the world. So thanks for being here, Caroline. Moving on to the next slide. Obviously, going to the zoo is usually a very immersive and interactive experience. So what have you done as a brand to maintain this during lockdown? And I think we've got a clue here on the screen.
Yeah. It was my Genius PR team who had the idea. I think it was within almost hours of us having to close the zoo we closed on the 21st of March. So from then on, no visitors coming in. And it was my PR team that said, well, how about we take the zoo to our visitors if they can't come to us? So very quickly, they were able to put together a plan of getting into the zoo whilst it was closed. And I think initially we just thought we'd do a Facebook Live from various areas around the zoo, a bit of a walk around. But then our keepers started wanting to get involved. I think we've worked for many years now with a production company, Blast, who produced The Secret Life of the Zoo for Channel 4, and that comes from Chester Zoo. So our keepers are well used to being in front of the camera and talking passionately about the animals that they look after. So they were really keen to join in. So suddenly we had ourselves with a full cast, and it was a simple, very, very simple turnaround of an iPhone on the end of a 2-metre long pole to aid social distancing. And on the first week, we just broadcast to Facebook from a number of different animal habitats, and the keepers talked and did what they do best, which is talking passionately about the species that they work with. And it kind of flew. It was fantastic. For that first live, we had 12 million views of that on Facebook, which was absolutely staggering, but brilliant. And our Facebook following increased by 46% that week. So we couldn't have been happier, really. We were trending in the top 10 in the UK while we were live. And what we found that we'd actually tapped into was all these parents, like myself, who are schooling at home now and juggling everything, and lots of teachers who are encouraging their charges remotely to do stuff which is a bit different and a bit fun to keep the learning fresh. And we found that they were tuning in, and parents were just saying, right, Chester Zoo's on TV, Chester Zoo's on the computer, just sit and watch that for a good couple of hours and learn lots. So it really helped us to engage with our visitors whilst they couldn't come to the zoo. So week 2, we extended it and put it onto YouTube as well. So that's 2 iPhones on the end of a 2-metre long pole. No high tech here. And then more recently, I think we've done about 7 so far. We've extended it to Just Giving as well as a live platform, so that we can hook it into our fundraising. So it's been incredibly successful for us, and it really reflects the objectives that we kind of quickly had to turn to once the zoo was closed, which was about staying in touch with our visitors and our members so that they didn't forget us, and so they kept that loyalty to us and that interest in us. And we have 130,000 members who come to the zoo regularly, and it was something to help stay in touch with them as well, because retaining their membership has been a key objective for us since we've been closed and ongoing, really. And also, another delightful element of this was that for those people who have been furloughed, and we had to furlough over half the team at the zoo, this was a great way for them to stay in touch as well. And certainly for me, working at home, I've not been into the zoo until recently for several weeks, and it was just great to be able to see everything going on there and know that, you know, everything was ticking over pretty well without us while we worked at home. So it's been a brilliant success, and the plan is that maybe we'll just keep on doing them. We'll have to cap numbers once we reopen. So this is a great way of enabling those people who can't get tickets to come to the zoo or are still shielding or whatever to be able to see a bit of zoo life from home.
That's so nice to hear, and just proves that the crisis doesn't have to be detrimental for every brand. It's nice that with such an immersive sort of business that you are, that relies on people, you know, footfall and people coming to the zoo, how you've managed to turn that around. And I think we're seeing a lot of people using their iPhones, and it's kind of creating a level playing field, isn't it? Lots of people are using iPhones to film themselves and take pictures of themselves and engage with people on social.
I think there's a kind of real affection for the authenticity of it as well. People don't mind when you're going through a crisis, people don't mind. They just want to know that you're doing your best for them. So the fact that 2 of our guys had made it into the zoo, the keepers are still working despite everything, and they just pulled out their iPhones and did the best that they could. And yeah, the sound wasn't always great, but looking at the comments, that everybody was so supportive and just pleased that we were giving them a little bit of a behind-the-scenes tour, really. So yeah, I think there's a lot of you don't have to have a big production kit or setup just to be able to get something out that people really enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing that with us. I have another question here. So it's around the public safety. So once you reopen, there'll be concerns around public safety, of course. So have you got any initiatives planned to reassure your customers? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, absolutely. And these have been emerging tactics, really, which we've seen other attractions bring to the fore in other countries. But I would say, really, from the day that we closed, we started preparing for opening, knowing that we were going to have to make some changes. So the team on site have done a fantastic job, and we are restricting numbers. We're going to be on a day like this, school holidays, sunshine, we'd probably be attracting in between 10 to 15,000 visitors. But from when we reopen, we'll be capping that to much, much less. And we'll require everybody to book online before coming to the zoo. So even members who can normally just use their membership card to come in whenever, we'll need them to book as well. So that's a big change for people. So there'll be a lot of comms for us around that change and reminding people of the things that they need to do. Once they get into the zoo, no contact in terms of checking tickets and so on. It'll all be new scanning equipment. And then once people are in, unfortunately, we won't be able just yet to reopen our restaurants and cafes, but there'll be lots of takeaway options. We're going to have a welcome team. I think lots of staff are getting involved in the welcome team, including myself. We'll be out there at the front of the zoo, just reminding people about social distancing, helping direct them, and ensuring that they still have some of that fun that they come to the zoo for, that family time that's so important. Huge amounts of signage gone in, and the markings on the floor reminding people where to stand, and things like having to we've put some nice lines around some of the bigger windows to remind kids not to go up and touch the windows, because that's one of the things we need to reduce, that contact on the hard physical barriers around the zoo. But I think what's really, really important for us is to make sure that we retain some of that Chester Zoo magic. So we'll be talking to the kids about if you stand with your arms out wide, maybe you'll be as wide as an orangutan when they put their arms out wide. Or maybe you should remember that a tapir can weigh 2 meters. So step away from the person in front, just in case they were a tapir. And don't go near the windows because there might be crocodiles there. So we can do all those fun sort of things and encourage the kids to still have fun and perhaps walk along a wavy line on the ground rather than run all over the place and bump into other people. So, yeah, there will be changes, but we're really focused on making sure that people go away and say, yes, it felt safe, yes, it felt good, and we want to go back again. So that's our objective, really.
Oh, nice. And it seems that you've got lots of creative ideas up your sleeve to try and resolve that issue. So that's good. So a question that we've had on quite a few other webinars is based around budget. So with budgets being cut across the industry, Marcoms pros have had to think outside the box, of course, which it seems like you have done already. But what have you done to ensure continued public funding and donations? Because I imagine that your revenue relies quite heavily on that.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of our income, which then, is used for our charitable objectives around conservation and education, the majority of that income does come through visitors. So through the ticket buying, the memberships, and what they spend on food and beverage and retail when they're at the zoo. So that's taken a huge hit. I have a very small fundraising team. In fact, now that we've furloughed people, I've got one person on fundraising. So we're working very hard, and she's doing a brilliant job to get the message out to trusts and foundations and let them know how much we need, because obviously NHS, has been the focus, the primary focus for everybody, and everybody has their own family challenges as well around about money and income and job security. But we've kind of gone out with a message that if you are then able after that to think about supporting charities, then please do so, because certainly for zoos this is an absolutely it's such a hard time, because we don't have that income and yet we still have the costs. We have still have to feed the animals. We still want to make sure the welfare is absolutely the high standard that they're used to, and we have to pay those keepers and the scientists and the vets to be there and look after them. So our costs have remained high, but our income has virtually stopped. So it's about for us, I think, a rebalance now of whereas in the past our focus has been very much about getting the visitors in, and we had 2 million in last year. This, from now on, I think, for the short and medium terms, certainly, our focus is around sharing those stories of what we do, not only at the zoo in Chester, but also with the conservation and education programs that we do around the world. So we work in many different countries supporting conservation programs. And I think those stories need to be heard and help us to do the fundraising. We don't have any public funding. We don't have any government funding. So it is really about engaging people with the work that we do, even if they can't come to the zoo. So for me, it's about that shift and that refocus on our work to make it much more less dependent on a zoo visit, I guess.
Great, thank you. And one last question. Do you have any advice, comms advice, on trying to avoid confusing messaging at this time, given that this is the theme?
I think it's about just checking the clarity. I've only got a very small team, particularly at the moment, but we all work so closely together just to check the consistency, just to check that we're everything that we're doing is understandable, and also to make sure that our internal comms are as transparent and as consistent with our external comms as well. That's been really vital. So just sense check stuff and don't overcomplicate issues is my advice, really, and understand what your key objectives are, and from that the clear comms should flow.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Okay, going to move on to a completely different industry now. Let's hear from Chris Baker, founder of Serious Tissues. So a bit about Chris. He is a multi-award-winning social change strategist who's honed his skills working in the communication sector on the full spectrum of society's problems, from knife crime and climate change to refugee crisis, illiteracy, disinformation, homelessness, loneliness, child abuse, poverty and obesity. He was previously head of strategy and social change at FCB Inferno, the UK's leading communications agency, in creating campaigns that make the world a better place. And now the founder of Serious Tissues, a new recycled toilet paper brand. So thank you for being here, Chris. Can you tell us a bit more about Serious Tissues?
Absolutely. I think it all started really while I was still at the agency at FCB. We created something called Change Please, which is a coffee business that trains homeless people as baristas to help them off the street. And the principle was very much, you'd see somebody walking past someone in the street, ignoring them like they weren't there, walk into a coffee shop and spend £3 on a skinny latte. And we thought, if we could just get them to change where they buy their coffee, we could make a real difference to homelessness. So we launched Change Please, which was which basically would drive that change in behaviour. Get someone to spend money slightly differently. You're going to buy your coffee anyway. Why not buy it here rather than from Starbucks or Costa, and you can improve someone's life. So that was, I think it was 5 years ago. This November that will have launched. So it's been going a long time, gone really well. I've since left the agency and got more involved there. And the thinking was really around, okay, this worked really well with coffee. There's the opportunity here for this to work on a number of other things. And about a year ago, we started thinking about, okay, actually, there's an opportunity here with tissue paper, with toilet roll, those kind of things. To basically, it's a commodity product. Obviously, quality is important to a degree, but probably not quite so much as coffee, where it's very much about kind of speciality, premium coffee. So we thought if we could get people to slightly shift where they buy their toilet roll, we could address a real major social issue. So we created something we called Serious Tissues. The world's got serious issues, therefore here are serious tissues. You see what we did there? It took us ages. So we created that. At the time, the biggest issue in the world was, and pretty much still is, climate change. Obviously, then coronavirus came along and knocked us for six a little bit in terms of our planning. But so the initial plan was to create this toilet paper brand where the product is all recycled, and for every roll of toilet paper somebody would buy, we would plant a tree. And we had a range of tree partners lined up. We had our supply chain lined up. We had a number of different corporate partners who we made contacts with through the Change Please relationship. And we were going to launch as a business-to-business initially brand to start that ball rolling. And we were planning to launch, around now. I think June was always on the cards. But then everything happened with the pandemic hitting, and excuse the pun, but shit got very, very serious at the time. So we thought to ourselves, okay, we've got our supply chain, we've got this product, we've got the brand. If we adapt it very slightly, it makes sense for us to bring it forward. There was obviously the massive shortage of toilet paper and the kind of panic buying that was crazy, but happening everywhere. So, and we had toilet roll, and lots of places didn't. So we thought, okay, let's do this and let's get ourselves out there. So that's sort of the bit of a potted history of where it came from. There's a few more ways we changed because of the pandemic, which I can go into, but it was something we were working on for a long time, and we slightly changed the emphasis in that regard.
Great, thank you. So you mentioned you kind of brought your plans forward then. And how was that for you in terms of preparation-wise? Did you have things already up your sleeve, or was it just a question of go, get this out now? What was your your process and your strategy behind that?
Yeah, there was a fair bit to change. So we had the product and our suppliers, but we had to change it slightly in terms of being used for in-home rather than in offices, for example. We then had to go away and build a e-commerce platform very quickly, build a fulfillment engine, nail our packaging, like the box you see in front of you, build our social up much quicker than we had planned to. So it was very much let's put our foot on the floor and do it quicker. The other thing that was, obviously the most important issue at that time was the need to get resources to the NHS. We spent quite a lot of time looking at what is the best way for us to do that and to support. And different avenues popped up. We looked at PPE. We looked at, and that was very, very complicated. And if the military and the British government couldn't get PPE to the front line, a handful of people with some toilet roll wouldn't be able to make a dent in it. So that we steered clear of that. And spent a bit of time looking, and I eventually found the NHS Charities Together appeal, which is actually the same one that Captain Tom Moore was fundraising for, or Sir Tom Moore now, and he's probably much more than captain. So our money started going towards there, and it would help with things like accommodation, logistics in terms of travel, AV, so buying iPads and things so people who are in hospital could speak to their family at home, and also recovery after the event. So there's quite a few fairly sizable shifts that we made quickly. And I'm sure a lot of you are experiencing this. A lot of business works pretty well remotely, but when you have to go really fast, it would have probably been a bit easier to to get everyone together and really smash through it. But it probably cost us a few days, maybe a week or so, in terms of how that would work. But it worked out in the end in that regard. And it's something that we brought forward for good reason. We thought there was a good opportunity for us to really divert some funds away towards the NHS and the appeal. But it's very much a long-term play. The tree thing, the climate change thing, is a big issue that's not going to go away. And there's some absolutely crazy stats when you look at the number of trees people use just to wipe their bum, effectively. Like, I think the latest stat I've heard was in the course of one person's lifetime, you use enough toilet roll to account for almost 400 trees. I think it's 384 trees. So one person, just from their toilet roll usage, cuts down 400 trees. That is absolutely staggering, when the amount of paper that's in the economy and in the kind of circular economy that you could recycle and make toilet paper with. It's staggering that we're still cutting down an unbelievable amount of trees. I think it's 27,000 trees every day to make toilet roll. It's 10 million trees a year to make toilet roll. This is a major issue. And by shifting from your toilet roll that comes from virgin pulp, cut down from Swedish forests or the Canadian boreal, to recycled toilet paper that is not a million miles away from the same quality, you wouldn't notice it unless you are an absolute connoisseur of toilet paper, which I've definitely become over the last few months. You wouldn't really clock the difference. So it feels like we've brought it forward a few months because of what's happened here, but it's very much a long-term thing that we think we can make a big difference with. And I mentioned some of those corporate partners, working with big organisations that may use 1 million toilet rolls a year across their estate, and maybe their office will get smaller now that the pandemic's hit. But 1 million toilet rolls bought from us versus from, say, Andrex means 1 million more trees planted across the world. So it's a staggering opportunity and a shift in society that we need those trees. They shouldn't be cut down for toilet paper, basically.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really good initiative. So in terms of comms and the press then, did you see a narrative created by COVID-19 that your brand could fit into and create messaging around? So I'm kind of referring to the infamous toilet paper stockpiling gate that we had going on here. Did you kind of see that happening in the press and kind of think, yeah, actually we can jump onto this in our messaging?
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely saw it and we're like, this is crazy. Why has this gone to this level? I think because we already had a supply and we knew we could get out there relatively quickly, it seemed like it should be something we do. And I think the idea of, turning panic buying into a force for good seemed like a good shout. So that was definitely the plan. I think my son's about to come in.
No, Daddy.
No, Jasper.
Come here.
We talked about this earlier, saying what happens if the BBC, that thing where the BBC guy comes in the background. So.
Oh, it's happening.
Okay. This is Jasper. Hey.
Hello.
Hello. So I think we very much saw saw it as an opportunity, but I think not so much in a jump on the bandwagon and profiteer from it. This is something we've been working on for a year, and we just brought it forward to try and divert some funds. I think in all our communications we've been very honest and transparent with how we've built it, and our intention both before and after. So yes, we saw the moment of opportunity, and we talked about this a little bit earlier. I think the sense of disruption from a pandemic, yes, it creates chaos, but it also kind of in the same breath creates opportunity as well. So there's definitely numerous opportunities that have emerged from this that you've seen. You know, it's people charging fortunes for hand sanitizer is a kind of extreme example. But yeah, I think that.
Oh, thank you. Obviously, coronavirus has flipped PR on its head, dominating the news agenda. What have you found challenging about the COVID-19 media landscape, and how do you think that PR professionals can take their stories back out?
I've seen a bit, buddy. Go on. Bye-bye. So I think I got that question. So I mean, basically, it was crazily fast moving. I mean, it's sort of slowed down a bit in the last few days, but it's taken a different tack. But at the time of launch, it was absolutely nuts in terms of Piers Morgan hammering everything, every single minister he brought on there. There was a new major development every single day. So it was challenging to get that cut through. We got a decent amount of coverage when we launched, but it was so hard to, generally there are ways you can plan for most events. I think in the context of a month or so ago, it was genuinely full on and constantly moving. So you almost had to just get it out there, see what happened, and adapt and evolve as it went through, really.
Great.
Yes, so that I think was the challenge.
Okay, fine. And since I've been asking everyone this question, what comms advice would you give to viewers and listeners in order to avoid confusing messaging? What's your top tip for that?
I would say absolute clarity and simplicity in messaging. So as you can see on the screen there, the 100% piece was as clear as we could be. 100% recycled roles, so very clearly coming from source, and 100% of profits going to the NHS and the appeal. So we tried to be as super clear as possible, and one of the great things about the tree promise as well is it's one role, it's one tree. So if you switch to Serious Tissues for a year subscription, you would effectively be replanting the number of trees you use in your lifetime from a year subscription, which is again pretty staggering as a stat. So the kind of clarity and the term optics comes up a lot, but the optics of that was super tight. I think there's a massive need to be almost brutally honest, brutally transparent in the nature of what's happening at the moment. If we'd launched and not talked about the other things we've been doing and how it had been in development, I think it would have gone down. It could have been misconstrued and seen as jumping on the bandwagon or profiteering, for example. And it's very much not that. This is a long-term play that we've been working on for a long time, and this is the first of many that we are planning to roll out as part of this Change Please movement and just shifting those behaviours. So we didn't want to. We had to be totally honest, basically, and I think. I'd like to think that is a thing that with comms more generally, that can become more common, more transparency, more honesty. I also think that there's something in being human and fallible when you're launching things, and something you don't see from our politicians, never be able to admit that you've done something wrong or you've made a mistake. But in business, failure is a not naming any names or anything, but in business, failure is a virtue, right? In politics, you can't ever apologise or say you're wrong about anything. So actually, something about that, I think, is a good thing that would potentially be taken forward. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Chris. That's been really interesting to hear. Unfortunately, we've lost Richard due to personal issues, so I'm going to move on to the questions now. So let me take a look at the questions that we've had come in. So Caroline, heading back to you, we've got somebody here ask a question. How much longer do you think it would have taken you to implement this plan if you hadn't had the experience with the TV programme?
Quite a bit longer, I think. Yeah, we've watched and learnt a lot. And in fact, we've done some work around starting to populate our own YouTube channel and starting to think about creating short films for that. So my guys have done quite a bit of work around that. But one of the things I know we saw when we started filming the TV series way back in 2012, 2013, was the nervousness of our keepers to get involved and to put themselves in front of the camera. You know, the press were big bad guys, and these came under the same banner, really. So it was an interesting journey that in Series 1, we only had a few keepers come forward confidently, and the rest needed to be encouraged. Series 2, lots more people were putting themselves forward and saying, "Oh, I'd like to do that. That would be good." So I think we'd have experienced some of that nervousness about being filmed and about talking to camera had we not had the TV series already. But as it was, and as it is, we have a series of keepers who are well prepped. I mean, we do have some absolute stars in there who are very comfortable talking to the public, because they will do talks around the zoo, during the day anyway. So a big audience in front of them doesn't faze them. It's just the thought of how much further that goes when you've got a TV or Facebook Live broadcast. So I think, it would have taken us a bit longer. It would have been great to have just filmed around the zoo, but having that keeper involvement just makes it so much more special.
Great, thank you. And we've got another one here for you, Caroline. What do you think is the most important media for coverage of your communications at the moment during the COVID outbreak? E.g., is it press coverage, social media coverage, or word of mouth marketing?
I'd say it's been a bit of media, of press, really, of press and social media. I think we have utilised social media to the best of our abilities, and that's worked really well for us. We've been able to stay in touch. People have been able to keep that love of what we do alive, and we've kept our brand values coming through all our comms through social media. Press interest has been, I would say, full on and steady. You know, right from the beginning, we've had interest in TV crews, news crews primarily, coming along and doing pieces about life in lockdown at the zoo. And now we'll see an evolution of that as zoos begin to open. Interestingly, I think we have, been very excited about the day that we open and we'll be able to get the press in. We don't have that date yet, but hopefully it'll come soon. But when you normally open something new at the zoo, or you have a birth of a new animal, then that's your story, and it's unlikely that other zoos are going to have the same story. When we open this time, all the zoos will be scrabbling to reopen and get those gates back open again and get those doors open. So it will almost be a case of first off the blocks, I think, a little bit, that the media will say, well, if this zoo's opening first, we'll go to them. So we'll see how that goes. It's not a story that's going to be unique to every individual zoo. So we'll be looking to put our own slant on it. And work with news crews that that we've had experience of working with, who are familiar with the zoo, and really use the press, I think, to show the safety features that we've put in and illustrate how a zoo visit will feel. But then again, everything that we do, we also put that through our social media channels as well. So owned and earned has been particularly strong for us.
Great, thank you. So I've got one for Ben here. So Ben, do you have any top tips to make your stories stand out in light of the current climate at the moment?
Well, a lot of our stories are unfortunately COVID related, So, I mean, I think what we bring at the moment is a kind of perspective of people who are experiencing the impact of COVID from not just those who've had COVID-19, but then also the impact it's had on other people's health and social care as well. And we've sort of moved on in ourselves in terms of how we use the stories that people share with us to then to then engage the public with our work. So so we've had some really amazing work by some of our local services in terms of how we've got one service which they before government was even thinking about their national volunteer scheme, they've managed to recruit 2,000 local people. Had all the local boroughs covered, had street coordinators in place to help people who were having to self-isolate because of COVID-19. And that's a really powerful story, and it's all about people doing their bit to make things better for other people, which is very much sits at kind of the heart of our brand. And we've also had some of our volunteers, as I said during my talk, some of our volunteers are older. Some of them have had to self-isolate because, they're in the vulnerable category. But actually, they've also then come forward, and we've used their stories as a way of actually trying to present a lot of the public advice and information. So, dealing with your, staying socially connected, we've all found it hard during lockdown. Maintaining your mental health, is hard during lockdown. But it can be particularly hard for those who relied on their kind of social connection. Often that was with local services or local care groups. And so their stories, using those to help reach people in a similar position, has been really powerful. And as I say, I think we've all, I think every organisation has its own unique sort of take on how COVID has impacted you and the implications it has for you. And I think there's a sort of strength in that gives you a kind of unique perspective and angle that might not have been covered before. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. So I've got one here for Chris. Kirsty has said, it's hard to get cut through for messages about any causes not related to COVID-19 right now, but those causes are still important. How and when do you envisage being able to start returning to your core issue of climate change?
I mean, it's a great question and a tricky one to answer in kind of concrete terms. I would say, I mean, all the way through everything we're doing at the moment, the climate change piece is a secondary message. So we're talking about tree planting and our original intention. So it's there. It's just not the main focus. And we're committed to the NHS for another, I think, 3 months in terms of where the money goes from our product sales. We don't anticipate we're suddenly going to click our fingers and coronavirus is going to go away. A lot of that money will go to recovery of NHS workers. So I imagine it's been brutal for them, and the opportunity to have some time off, have some help with the mental health and that kind of thing is important. So the fact it's still driving in that direction for the foreseeable future is important, because then it's we are genuinely making an impact with what we do. Our intention of when we move to climate change, I think it's one where we're preparing in the background. So we've got the pages on our website, the content that is ready when we decide to make that switch. But it will be a case of almost reading what's happening in the world at the time. If there's lots of conversation at the moment around building back better, and people seeing this as a catalyst to change a number of different behaviours and ways they do things. So I think there's ways we can frame it within the narrative as we start to recover and emerge. So I think it's very much a case of flexibility, of being ready and ready to deploy those things when the time comes. But it's not all bets are off, really. It's not a normal year where you can go, I don't know, it's Earth Day or equivalent, or Greta speaking at the United Nations, or the COP26 conference in November that was planned in Glasgow. It's not as simple as hooking it on a key moment. I think this year there will need to be a little bit of nimbleness, a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of agility and ability to deploy quickly once the moment is there. But this is not going to be a quick thing that goes away rapidly. So it will happen, but and we'll be ready, but very much in the background. And when the time is right, we'll change our focus. But not anytime soon, I would say.
I think you touch on quite an important message there about having the content prepped in the background, but also just having that flexibility. And I think probably quite a lot of people can take away from that. Just being prepped in the background and having that messaging ready to go out when the time does come, because it will end at some point.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's probably something that, like from previous experience in agency land, it's not something that most clients are comfortable with. It's not something that most agencies are comfortable with, being able to say, we'll probably launch sometime in Q3 or Q4. Like it's very hard to get all your stakeholders suddenly aligned and ready. I would say if that's the case, pick a day, and if it has to move back, it moves back, because then you can align people to, okay, we're going to do it on, I don't know, October the 8th, and then if it has to move back for logical reasons, people are going to say, of course, that's fine, but you will already have secured their buy-in and approval before that. I also think there's something in probably scenario planning a little bit, so if X and Y happens, then we do this, or if this happens, then we do that. The kind of classic wargaming approach that governments apparently go through when they're planning for things like pandemics. So, plan for a couple of different scenarios and pick the one that feels like the strongest answer at that particular time, because, all bets are off a little bit at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much. Caroline, we've got a couple of questions here. A couple of people have asked the same thing. Did you have to provide any media training to your staff?
No, I wouldn't say we did full-on media training. We ensure they're well briefed. They know who the audience, generally is. They know the purpose. We'll give them some key messages to try and work through. But I have to say, in the main, they are absolutely passionate about the job that they do, and that just shines through, and that's really captivating. So that passion is there. I think, for the live stuff, everybody's really keen to get involved, and we will, in an ideal world, we'll pick those who are, really, really clear and very comfortable in front of a camera. When you're working with animals, it might be that you can't have that team member that day. You need somebody different. So you have to have that flexibility, really, and you can't really just push certain people to the fore. So I wouldn't say full media training, but understanding what they need to be able to do the job well for us is important, and making sure they have all the tools that they need. Obviously, if we're looking at news crews coming in, we might tailor who we use and not just use the keepers, but extend that out to some of the director team as well. But in the main, everybody just bonkers about the work they do, and it shines through beautifully.
Oh, great. I've got another one here. I'll direct this one over to Ben. Do you have any crisis comms plans in place, or was it just you sort of creating them now as the crisis occurred, or did you have any sort of guidelines put in place beforehand?
Yeah, no, we did have some guidelines. I mean, I sort of learned over life of my career that there are certain when bad things happen, the things that it's a very hectic environment, and having a checklist of things you should consider and think about is your kind of most useful plan. And so yes, we always have one. We had one of those in place. But of course, there were lots of things about this that we would never been able to consider. So the fact that we would have to stop all our events and community events and face-to-face engagement at services and on the streets, that was kind of something that I don't think we'd ever envisaged would happen across the whole country at one time. Nor would we, think that would also could be combined with the fact that all our services would have to, all our teams would have to leave the office and go and work remotely. Luckily, we had spent last year, doing quite a bit to reinvest in some of our, what you might call, your mechanisms. So we've, updated our website with a clear offer around advice and information. We set up a workplace, Facebook workplace community for our sort of 800 volunteers and our 800 staff and 5,000 volunteers. And so I think having some of those mechanisms in place really helped us. And where we were actually on the day that just before lockdown started, we had run a test to make sure that, sent everyone home and to make sure that, our service had the bandwidth to cope with all this, everyone video conferencing at the same time. So yeah, but I think all those and the mechanisms, like having a group which comes together really, really regularly, is able to clear and action decisions really, really quickly, and has access to the best, the latest information that you're able to get hold of and insight. So you're making the most informed choices you can, and being clear about what you can and can't do. Those things are all kind of things that you expect to see as part of a normal sort of crisis plan, and have proved to be very useful. I don't think we'd ever thought it would be in a situation where it would be so monumental and go on for so long, and where we wouldn't have a really clear end in sight. I think it's internally we were sort of talking about we've obviously had a load of information that we had to help communicate out to the public about COVID-19 and guidance and issues as we went into lockdown. And now as we go out, we're sort of having to go into reverse. But actually it's way more complicated, and it's probably going to get even more complicated, if you're talking about having localized lockdowns as a result of COVID-19. The track and trace scheme that was launched this morning, how that operates, there's bound to be some teething problems with it. And then, I think one of the main unknowns is actually how will this change us culturally? What practices will we want to keep, because actually they've sort of been quite transformative, but actually there's bound to be a negative impact of some of those on some of our audiences, and but also what behaviours will people not return to doing? So
yeah, I think you touched on a really interesting point there, that maybe companies and organisations will have a crisis comms plan or checklist put in place for when a crisis occurs and going into a crisis, but maybe brands need to look at a checklist of coming out of the crisis and the reverse. I think that's quite interesting, and an interesting way of looking at it, for sure. Thank you. So got time for one last question, so I'll shoot this one over to Chris. Freya here says, with the desire and pressure from marketing business leads to plan and execute timelines as planned, what advice can you give to ensure adaptive campaigns remain successful?
I mean, it's a tough one. I would say, the fundamentals of your, it's hard to know without knowing the kind of category you're in, but generally the fundamentals of the customer journey are pretty true no matter what you're doing, right? So, selling toilet paper or something else online, or you're building brands, or you're trying to generate engagement, the fundamentals of the journey stay fairly consistent. So you can take all those learnings you've learned in the past, all the things, the new inputs that are coming your way in the present, and apply them to the current situation. So the core of it hasn't changed that drastically. I suppose the messaging and the particular ask has, and you may need to slightly recut your messaging, reframe it. I think there's, everything is different at the moment. It won't stay that way. Human nature is the same in terms of what we react to, and the kind of psychology and behavioral economics. We will keep doing the things we've evolved to do over millions of years. So the fundamentals are the same. The messaging may need to shift slightly, and I think, yes, it is a bit of chaos, but there's also opportunity and a way to make people think in a fresh way about your brand or your business. And I think aligning I just noticed your second point on there around KPIs. I think your KPIs may change very slightly, but the core of your customer journey still rings pretty true and stays fairly consistent around that. So you may just have slightly more in terms of I don't know, if you're trying to reach a new audience through what's happening in the world at the moment, there may be a slightly different KPI there around new audience growth, for example. But realistically, the majority of your KPIs should be, 9 out of 10 of them will be fairly consistent no matter what you're doing, I would have thought. But without knowing the nature of your business, it's tough to properly nail.
Thank you, Chris. So that's all we have time for, I'm afraid. Thank you for plugging in your questions, and thank you to everyone who was able to join us today, especially to our panel for taking the time to talk about the projects they've been working on. And apologies again, where we lost Richard, but we gained a mini human with Chris. So, but it's been brilliant having you guys on the panel, and thanks again so much for taking the time to join us.
No worries. Thank you. Bye.